going to give you my 2-volume biography, but I decided that I want to talk a little bit about is service, as you know. Last week, I outlined my proposal to spend this coming year concentrating on service as our main theme. I said then that there were 2 reasons for doing this. The first is that our new International President, John Germ, has chosen as his motto for the year, which you can see on the front, Rotary Serving Humanity. And then in doing so, John Germ has put this issue of service front and center for all Rotarians throughout the world. But the second reason that I wanted to emphasize service this year was because after spending a whole year looking back over our history during the centennial celebrations and hearing more of those stories about Panchovilia, I felt Marsha mentioned Panchovilia today, so where is she? And so we had, yeah, right. So she wanted to revive another story, but I told her no. But after looking back over the past year of our work over the last 100 years, I felt now that we needed to begin to look forward for the next 100 years, so to speak, and to return to some of our Rotary roots. And for this club in particular, I think that means service. This emphasis on service does not negate the traditional Rotary understanding of our being a place where business people come to make friends and acquaintances, a place where people come to be known and to know others, and in many of our weekly presentations, to hear about the businesses in our community, and to understand their role in our broader life. It's also not to negate what I think is the very important social time that we spend together, because I believe that in knowing one another and in sitting down and breaking bread with one another, we provide an essential component of fellowship that builds a stronger community in which there is a mutual respect for each other, even in the midst of our differences. But at its core, Rotary is about service. It is a service organization. That's why our premier motto remains service above self. Now, service in our communities is not something new. All the great religions in the world, for example, stress some form of giving in service to others. Alan mentioned that in his prayer this morning. That was very helpful. So, did I say Alan? We were talking about Alan earlier. Sorry, Gordon, Past President. I like Alan, so that's okay. He just called me Marsha. As Gordon pointed out so well in his meditation, and many of us grew up being taught these values of service and giving, either from our faith traditions or from our families. Indeed, I was raised, as I said last week, by priests and nuns in the orphanage, a place which so often was the recipient of service from others in the community. We would have the practice of local parishes coming into our orphanage, where they would help with projects on our buildings, where they would take children like me out for ice cream and other treats, which was always something very special, and they would come and read to us. And so we all learned from a very early age that giving back in service was the necessary part of living. And examples of faith-based organizations are numerous in our communities. We see it in Habitat for Humanity, the Salvation Army, and the JCC. But others, apart from their faith, have also pointed out the importance and the value of service. Alexis de Tocqueville, that great student of American culture, pointed out that in America, in sharp contrast, he said, to other developed countries, we have a formidable ability to form associations apart from and not reliant upon government in order to address the needs of our communities. I think it's an astute observation on de Tocqueville's part to say that we can do many, many, many things apart from the governmental entities, and we should not rely upon government to always help us. Amy Sherman, in her book, Restorers of Hope, also suggests that there is an importance in getting to work with the people in our communities in such a way that they understand that they are part of the process of change in their communities. Because relationships are important, and that's what Rotarians are very good at. They're very good at establishing relationships and forming those bonds in our communities. And there are other benefits to serving, not just for those being served, but for those who volunteer their time in service. Last week, you may recall that I was introduced by my one-time good friend and colleague, Glenn Knoll. I couldn't resist Glenn, sorry. And Glenn introduced me with 10 things that an alien president should remember in running the club this year. Now, I cannot match Glenn's wit, his humor, even his charm. I am, after all, as you all know, a shy, quiet, and reserved sort of person. But I thought, why not find the 10 reasons that service is a good thing? So while it's not as funny as Glenn, I hope that this 10-point summary will emphasize the theme of service as a core part of life in this club. So, starting with number 10, it's good for you. Service is good for you. Volunteering has physical and mental benefits. Reports tell us that when we focus on someone other than ourselves, it interrupts the usual tension-producing patterns in our lives and makes us healthier, while positive emotions like optimism and joy strengthen our immune systems. Number 9, it saves resources. Volunteering provides valuable community services so that more of our public funds can hopefully, I say hopefully, be spent on local improvements. Did you know that the estimated value of a volunteer's time is $15.39 per hour? That's what we're saving our communities in public funds when we provide services in our communities to others. Number 8, volunteers gain professional experience. Just look around this room and see how much experience there is amongst our members. Where else can you find so much experience? Where else can you learn so much from others simply by being a part of the volunteer and community services that you all are a part of? Number 7, it brings people together. And if we need anything in our world and in our culture today, it is this ability to bring people together. When we volunteer, when we provide community service, we unite people from diverse backgrounds to work toward a common goal. We build camaraderie, we build teamwork along the way. These are valuable and important assets for the future of our community. Number 6, it promotes personal growth and self-esteem. Understanding community needs helps foster empathy and self-efficacy. Number 5, service strengthens our communities. Just think of all the ways in which service is provided by many of you and many others in our community. We support families. That's so important in our world today. Daycare, elder care, families are supported through our volunteer efforts. We improve our schools. The tutoring and the literacy programs that we heard about today are important components of the way in which we strengthen our communities. We support our youth, not only through things like our junior ROTC, but we support youth in so many other ways in our communities, through our scholarship programs, through our emphasis upon the programs of Student of the Month, and so on. And we beautify our community. Think about the amazing work that Preserve Planet Earth has done just in this community to be able to plant trees and clean up parks and restore our lakes here in the city. Number 4, we learn a lot. When we volunteer, when we give of ourselves, we learn a lot, both about ourselves And I think that's always important. We learn things about government, the way it works or doesn't work, and we learn a lot about our community. Number 3, when we give of ourselves, we have a chance to give back. People like to support community resources that they use themselves or that benefit people that they care about. But I think it's also important, this sense of giving back, because many of us have been blessed in our lives. I came from a different form of childhood than probably most of you here. But when I came to this country, I came literally with one suitcase. People ask me why I do what I do in the community. It's because I think it's terribly important that I have been blessed here in this country, and I want to give back what I can to the communities in which I live. Number 2, volunteering encourages civic responsibility. Community service and volunteerism are an investment in the future of our communities and the people who live in it. And number 1, you make a difference. You make a difference. You make a difference. Every single person makes a difference. Every contribution that is made makes a difference. Every person counts. Every person can make some contribution in some way. So I want us to think in this coming year about service. Let's think about how, as a club, we may increase our service in this community and around the world. Let's consider how we might set the tone for the next 100 years of our existence as a club by making service the center of our life together. And to help in that process, I've asked John Klinedinst to share with us some of his own personal thoughts about service. The first of what I'm going to be calling the monthly spotlight on service. This is going to be an effort to raise up different forms of service for locally, for nationally, and for internationally in the 12 months of this year. I've asked John particularly to speak because not only is he a past president of this club, but also because he's a person for whom I have great and deep respect. And I consider him to be a very fine example of someone who is both a business leader in our community and a person dedicated to a life of service within that same community. Now, most of you know that John was recently awarded the Chapel of the Four Chaplains Legion of Honor Award for all of his community service, a recognition that is not only well-deserved, John, but adds to the recognition that he has previously received in this community. John, for all of your service, I want to say a word of thanks on behalf of our club and on behalf of our community. And I would ask the members that they join me in welcoming Past President John to speak to us of service.
Thanks, Paddy. President Paddy asked me to talk about service, and since he's already talked about what service means and how it fits within the context of the Rotary year, I'm just going to talk about some examples. And this is not to brag about my service. I want to be very clear about that. I'm a little uncomfortable talking about a lot of the things I'm going to talk about because I don't want it to sound like bragging. This is just my story. Okay, we all have a story, and there's a lot of stories like mine in this room, but Paddy asked me, so here I go. And I'm lucky because I get to work for a company at C.S. Davidson that believes as a core value in community service. So it was a perfect match. My personal identification or my personal definition of service is doing something to help someone else without receiving anything in return, except personal satisfaction for making an impact in someone else's life. That to me is service. And service means commitment, time, talent, or money. We all have something to give. We can use some of what we have for service. All of us have something. Most of the service I could talk about falls under the Rotary vocational service or community service lanes to the avenues of Rotary service. Just as a reminder, and for our guests, vocational service calls on every Rotarian to do work with integrity and contribute their expertise to the problems and needs of society. In other words, we have a business responsibility. That is Rotary. Community service encourages every Rotarian to find ways to improve the quality of life for people in their communities and to serve the public interest. I probably picked up the tradition of service from my mother. She helped at church, Boy Scouts, band, and we've all had those experiences. She helped everyone. So I learned very early about selfless service. The earliest service I can ever recall was volunteering to restack books at Martin Library, and I'm sorry Robert's not here. I must have been all of about 10 or 11 when it happened, probably before Robert was born. In 1986, and I think you know some of this story, I was asked by a friend to join my first organized club of service volunteers. That was Sertoma International. And just so you know, the word Sertoma is an acronym that comes from Service to Mankind. Sounds a lot like Rotary, right? Well, it really is. In 1912, 3 guys who couldn't get into Rotary formed their own organization. That is a true story. The classifications were taken very seriously back there, and they already had a banker and a doctor and a lawyer. They couldn't get in. The bylaws and constitution of the organization were clones of the Rotary Constitution bylaws. The York Club I joined is still in existence, still providing service, and I'm still a member. That's organized service. They do great service. They've done everything from work projects like building buildings at Camp Penwood for art, to adopting a street in York for cleanup, to now performing hearing screenings for children in partnership with Spirit Trust. And as a result of that organized service, I got even more hooked on service, and I went up through the leadership of Sertoma, and I became the international treasurer. And I thought at the time that the higher I got in the organization, the further I was getting away from actually providing service. But I'll come back and talk about that in a second. That's what I thought at the time. And about that time, this is how the business part blends in. At the time, I was working, doing an actual project for Eastern York School District. And I went to 2 of their board meetings, and both board meetings, they complained about the fact that there was a vacancy in my region. And I get frustrated with vacancies and absences. And I didn't know anything about school boards or public education or anything, but I said, sure, why not? I've never done that before. So I was appointed, and then I ran successfully for a 4-year term, and I finished as board president. And I haven't run for any elected office since, so there's no message there. Just saying. And about that time, I began to learn some things about myself. I hate vacuums and vacancies in leadership or vacancies in decision-making. And 2, I couldn't say no. And between those 2, I was doomed. I learned a lot on the school board, and hopefully I had some positive influences, especially on the buildings and grounds side of things, which is actually my engineering background. And then I decided that does have an impact on the school district and public education system and the students. So I began to make that connection. Then I was asked by a friend, Andy Siebold, who was sitting with Bobby, so they're all gone. I was asked by Andy to join the board of Access York. And again, I didn't know anything about domestic violence services, but I thought I might be able to help with governance issues and funding. That's when I began to see a pattern about service on nonprofits and funding. There's a little link there. So I joined the board of Access York, and I took on a position that even though I could do very little in providing direct services to their clients, I could work at the governance level using the business experience I had begun to develop to help ensure stability and sustainability, support the staff and the volunteers in their work, and help with fundraising. And for a while, I enjoyed the relatively close, comfortable, essential, and effective world of Access York. And then it was about my second meeting, we separated with the CEO. There's a lesson there, too. So as a part of that leadership transaction, we went through a merger with YWCA York. I ended up on both the due diligence committee, and then after we decided that it was not only the right thing to do, it was good to do for both organizations, served on the implementation committee. Again, I had no skills directly related to the services of the YWCA, but I could use my business leadership skills to help make business decisions for stability and sustainability and fundraising. And when they started a building renovation of 320 East Market Street, I'm in the civil engineering field, I understand construction, I could really help with the project management part of that project. And so I learned, or figured out, that even though I couldn't help provide direct service to clients, the decisions that I helped make at the board level or at the project level did in fact have a direct impact on the professional services of the YWCA. And then somehow went on to be president of the board of the YWCA, never again to be allowed on shore. And then I got hooked on the Chamber of Commerce. Bob Jensenius got me involved in I volunteered to be on the Route 30 Safety Committee because of Mike Ugalano, who was a member of the club, who was killed in an accident out there. And somehow, Bob accepted my volunteer offer, and I ended up being chairman of the committee. And it was fun, and I learned stuff. And then the Economics Club and the Pro Business Council, and then the Chamber Board, and through a merger with the Economic Development Corporation to the York County Economic Alliance. And at some point in there, I asked Bobby Simpson if there were any openings on the Crispus Attucks board. You know, I look back at that question now, and I think he must have really thought I was crazy. Somebody asking to go on a board. But at the time, I thought there were 3 organizations downtown that were doing a really good job of community revitalization, the YM, the YW, and Crispus Attucks. We already had somebody on the YM, so I thought it was a good fit. And Crispus Attucks had a construction project going on down at the Early Learning Center, and again, I could provide some project management support. I guess around that time, I finally figured out that my own DNA screams, if you aren't part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so I think that I finally figured out why I do what I do. And it was about that time that the Cultural Alliance called, and then Di Hershey called from Penn State York, and around that time I joined Rotary, and the rest is history. And I think I told you this before, but for some of the newer members, years ago, when I talked about Rotary, before I was a member, I'd been told that Rotary, and I'll quote this because this is what was told to me, Rotary is a group of old white guys who eat lunch every Wednesday at the York County and write checks. I mean, that's the way Rotary was described to me, which really didn't sound too appealing. And I found out was really wrong. Okay, well, there's a lot of old white guys, and I'm one of them now. And we did eat lunch every Wednesday at Yorktown. But there were also a lot of great leadership women involved, younger members, and more diversity than I had expected. Very organized. I loved the organization's service. At the time I was president, we had 42 committees. That's organization. Very service-focused. It's a business service organization. And not just writing checks. Lots of opportunities for service. And then lately I've been asked to serve on committees, some capital campaigns, task committees for a specific issue. So here I am. I think I'm a much better person for all the opportunities that I've had to provide service with whatever talents that I had available to me. And I'm winding down now, but I wanted to leave you with a couple of interesting things that have guided me. A friend gave me a card a long time ago with a quote from Edward Everett Hale, and it says, "I am only one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, let me not refuse to do the something that I can do." I think that's great. So my advice to all of us in this room is do something to help someone else, no matter what that is or what your part is. It's worth it. Service is about volunteering. It's about rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty. It's about helping govern an organization, or it's about writing a check. And there's a whole bunch of things in between those. We all have something to give in service to others, whether it's time or talents or money. Whatever works for you, just do something. Regardless of what it is, it'll help you. I love the Rotary line about planting trees that we may never sit under. That's service. Sometimes you get to see the results. Sometimes you plant trees. And if you're truly providing altruistic service, it doesn't matter. And Rotary gives all of us a focused approach to service across the street and around the world, as Frank Dickenhafer said. And just to finish my personal story of service, while at 65 I'm in the transition phase of corporate leadership and work, I've gotten so much back from service over the past 30 years or so, it's now my hobby. I truly enjoy it. I love having even a small impact in picking up a piece of trash or planting a tree or contributing what I can to the United Way or to a capital project. I love the people that I meet. I always learn something new, and I really enjoy the feeling of satisfaction that I may be having a positive impact that I may receive. I still get calls to serve, and I still can't say no, but I have finally, from necessity, learned to say, not now. That's my service story. I hope that's what President Paddy was looking for. I encourage you to create your own story. Thank you.